the 15-minute rev. Got a little Brandon Lake going on here. Man, he is so good. It's kind of one of those Fridays. It's freezing cold. My teeth are chattering. I am running around in a pair of shorts, and it was hot this morning, and I ran outside, and I was like, whoa, where did this come from? So anyway, yeah, the weather's apparently hit. So if you've got it in your region, that's what's going on. Looks like what do they call it? The polar vortex is here. So yeah. And all week long, I've been thinking, oh, it's not going to be that bad, because I've been watching it like through the Weather Channel and stuff like that, and watching it come down. Have you been watching it? So you guys in the East, you guys need to take care. Really take care of yourselves. I know you guys are really going to get hit hard if you haven't already, but a lot of snow, a lot of rain. I think it's just cold for us. I hope. But what's God saying for you today? What's going on in your world today? How are you guys doing this week, by the way? How are you guys doing? You guys doing okay? Facebook and YouTube, you guys making it through your week this week? And so, I mean, I know we're in the hardest part of this test. Everybody's major burned out, and God's got a word for you about that. And you know, when you're tested in burnout, I was telling our teams this morning that if you ever done relay racing or long distance running, I used to do that in high school. Pardon me. And you start off and you have to pace yourself. You have to pace yourself, because if you use up all your energy at the very beginning, you have nothing in the last leg of the journey. And so at the very, very beginning, when you're running an 880 or a 1600, pardon me, please, you have to find your rhythm in running and find your rhythm in intercession. Okay. Follow me here. So in the last two legs of it, even in relay racing, because relay racing is fast paced, so you really have to find your pace. But you have to wait for your second wind to come in. So the place that intercession has now entered into is overcoming the burnout test. And to where you actually enter into God's rest, and you start moving with God in such a way that your intercession now has become second nature to you. Okay. So it's not something that is hard for you to do anymore. It's not something that you dread doing. It's something you look forward to, hopefully. And it's because God has become so intimate with you that he tells you what you're going through the whole time you're going forward in this thing. And if you've noticed, like the last week and a half, the words coming forth from the Lord, even in the 15-minute revs, are very, very strategic. They're very literal, to the point from the Lord. He's telling us exactly what we're going through. And so if this is new to you, maybe you're not an intercessor. Pardon me. Maybe you haven't gone to church in a long time, and the 15-minute rev has intrigued you, and you're just kind of like, what is this lady talking about? But there's something that resonates with you. It's the prophetic, usually, because God's trying to show you a new way to do you. Okay, so he's trying to help you rethink things to where you come out of the flesh and out of your sufferings, to where you might rethink how you live your life and how you might let him bring you inside as the bride. And so that's where we're heading into. But what's the title? Today's not going to be very long, by the way, which is a shocker, because I was shocked too. But that's the way it worked out. But this is what God said. This is the title for today. He said, press through your burnout, hurtful exposures, and then he said, outlast the devil in your belief. Press through your burnout, hard, hurtful exposures, and learn to outlast the devil through your belief. Okay, we live by a season. This is site sourcing Kenneth Copeland, by the way. We live by a season of seed plus time equals harvest. And if you know any of our leaders in the past season, God bless them, because we wouldn't be where we're at without them. But the fathers of faith, that would be Kenneth Copeland, Jerry Savelle, Creflo Dollar, gosh, I want to say Keith. I forget his last name. Please forgive me, sir, if I've forgotten your last name. I've forgotten his last name, but he's in that group of, or Jesse Duplantis too. Thank you, Jesus. But they are fathers of faith, and they know how to believe for big things, big faith, but they understand the testing of time. And so we're entering into time, and And we're learning how to believe God for the divine. And so what did God do to you, Joseph? He gave you a huge thing to believe for. Some of you have been believing for things while you've been trying to get through your new door. And so in this season, firstly, if you're not aligned with God, it won't matter what you do unless it's deliverance, because you're not going to come through. And I'm not being negative, I'm being honest. And so if you have noticed all through 2023, then while God has been talking to you about a few things, and he's just been honing in on get deliverance, get deliverance, get deliverance, get deliverance, so that you actually have firepower in the new thing. And so now we're starting to see people lose firepower, just like God said would happen. And the spiritual laws are narrowing now. And so even the witchcraft doesn't have a way in. They're trying illegally to do it. But for the bride now, you're coming inside if you're not already there, which is a blessing for all of us. So we are learning now how to fight in this new place through time. Okay? And this is the new move. This is part of the new move of God. And if this is new to you, that's because you're probably used to the old structure that the church has been operating through. Okay, so that's the death structure of religion. And almost everybody in America has had to fight their way out of that thing. And so what is the difference between that and the new move? And the only way that I can actually articulate that to you is if you've gone to any denomination, I don't care what denomination you were in, there was a structure there. And some structures are even vastly different than others, like the Catholic religion, where they had their structures of you kneel and you stand up and the priest gets up but that's what they operate within. But then there's the Presbyterian structure, and then there's the Baptist structure and the Methodist structure. We could go on and on. Every religion, the Buddhist structure, they all have structures. But if they don't operate as love being king, Jesus Christ is the only way in. And you can disagree all day long. But if things aren't going well for you, then you might want to rethink a few things too. So Jesus Christ said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And I'm the only way to the Father who can give you life. And so, and who can make things new again for you. So if things aren't going well for you, that means you're stuck in the flesh too. You're stuck underneath that death structure. So it doesn't just have to be religion that's entrapped you. It can be the death structure of the flesh that's entrapped you, which segues right into what I'm talking about today with you. So I know that statement above is probably going to tick a lot of people off or evoke a lot of fear right off the bat, but I'm just called to tell you what he tells me. And so right now, I don't know about you, but if you haven't sensed it, God told us that truth was walking into the room. Okay. And so when truth walks into the room, what we begin to see is everything not aligned with God. We start beginning to see God's reality if truth is walking into the room, whether you agree with him or not. I don't know about you. Have you been listening to the news lately? Because we're seeing a lot of people, church leaders, now being pointed out by God. So, and it's going to get hot. And I don't know about you, but from what I've been hearing all last year too, where they said 2024 was going to be a real doozy. And I really honestly thought it would be different. Like it was going to be a lot of pressure on, and it may be for some of you. For me, I'm not experiencing that. What I am seeing is like this big whirlwind of activity starting to be evoked around me. It's like being in the middle of a tornado almost, but I'm in the eye of the storm. And so I'm watching this happen thinking, oh my goodness, I would not want to be out there with them. And so those are the things not aligned with God. Those are the people not aligned with God. And it's not a pride position that I'm saying that within. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing. And so if you're not aligned with God, that's because just because you chose, bride, to enter into God's time, that doesn't guarantee that everyone around you will join you. Okay, so that's something else we've had to contend with too, is thinking, well, if I do this, then everybody's going to see how good God is, and then they're going to want to do this too. And no, usually everybody's rejecting you. They're like, no, that's not God. Or no, you've got to do it this way. Have you been experiencing that too? Because I have been. It's like, I just kind of do your thing. I'm doing my thing. Bye-bye. So time, in order to enter in God's time, doesn't guarantee that everybody else is going to choose to align with you. So, which includes all 7 mountain leaders. It includes family. It includes friends. It includes church people, leaders too. That's part of the tornado we're beginning to see. So, what that means then is that those who have chosen to stay outside are choosing to stay in the flesh instead of entering into God's best, which usually includes hidden sin, which hindered them from coming in. And it's what God allowed and had to allow to force man to make a choice, whether to go through exposure to where he could begin again, or even if from a lower level, but at least man would have his salvation intact, or he would get stuck where he chose to sin, which is in the flesh. So what this basically means to me is that God allowed man to side, some men, to commit treason by working with the devil's heart, which is what the Bible talked about, through many choosing to stay in the outer courts with the gnashing of teeth. We see a lot of angry people these days, a lot of frustrated people, a lot of people not understanding how their lives have turned upside down, but they were in a different season then. And so the laws again have narrowed now as we've come forward in time. So the things that were allowed, the grace that was allowed 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, doesn't exist now. And as we move further and closer to God in time, that grace is gone. Matter of fact, it's going to get really dark outside. So instead of people choosing to enter into the sufferings of Christ, now that's depressing. Think about this. Sufferings of Christ. You're thinking, oh, what? You just said you're the bride, but you're in the sufferings of Christ. What makes your life so different from mine? Well, I've got help from a holy God. I'm not doing it by myself. So yes, I am entering into the sufferings of Christ, into transformation power, hopefully resurrection power, but I'm in a trust test. I'm choosing hopefully to come into God's best and to do things God's way. Although I may not understand them, it's at least keeping me at bay, or keeping the devil at bay. Keeping the devil at bay outside with those that are stuck outside. So when you choose to enter in the trust test, it doesn't mean your life's going to be a bowl of cherries all the time. It just means that you're probably learning to trust the Ancient of Days again, while you're learning his ways again, which he'll probably give you a prophetic word if he hasn't already done so. Few things to hold on to show you the way in which you should go. Then you start learning about intercession, decreeing a thing while you're moving through God's heart again. And you're learning about all the ways that God moves in the ebbs and flows of God again. The wind of God, the Spirit of God, what draws him near, what pushes him away, those things. Because you love him. You love him and you want to love like him because you've realized you can't live without him. I don't know about you. I can't take my next breath without him. And so what we're seeing then, I don't know about you too, but as opposed to 20, 25 years ago, when there was a grace there for those things where we weren't so aware, we were more in the flesh back then than we are now. If you were alive back, hopefully you're alive now. But yeah, if you were not as close to God back then, and maybe all you knew back then was even religion, but you knew there was more, and so you were seeking the more, and you didn't know why. But from even back then, you still had an understanding of who love was at that level that you were operating in, because that was allowed. But now, because of the latter glory, the double portion, there's a completely different spiritual set of laws that are starting to operate. So it's a narrowing, forcing us to comply with all truth and what God says we should do versus what we thought 20 years ago, or even 5 or 2 or whatever. When we thought that God would just overlook a thing or two. God said, no, not anymore. Because to whom much is given, much is required. So when you come close to me, you've learned quite a bit, hopefully by now, in order to abide in me so I can abide in you. But God says, I've got a plan. I've got a plan, bride, as I have you enter into the marriage supper feast, or the marriage feast, which brings us into Genesis 26:17 through 27:46, where it talks about faith not being able to grow apart from trials. And so if you're burned out and you've kind of lost your pace in your intercession right now, and you're thinking to yourself, how do I continue on? Because everything in me wants to stop, and it just doesn't care anymore. I'm just like on overload. I'm overwhelmed, and I'm getting hit from over here and over there. And God is like, even though you're emotionally and spiritually fatigued at the present, that's because witchcraft has been ratcheted up against you very purposefully to make you spiritually tired. It's very strategic because the enemy is trying to wear you out. So when you're spiritually tired, it's going to affect every area of your being, especially the physical, but you can break that off and come through. You have authority over that. You realize that, right, intercessor? You take authority with Luke 10:19 and you say, Spirit that's applying that witchcraft to me, if God didn't speak it, not your will, not your way, not your truth, vetoing it, nullifying it, 1 Corinthians 1:19, letting it fall to the ground off of me. And you'll get your physical strength back just like that. Seriously, it's instant. It's instant. So that's what a fake and a lie witchcraft is. And so many people are duped by it. So you've got authority over that. So if you haven't noticed, then again, all truth is coming out in this season, all of a sudden, too, in the last week. Have you noticed that, too? And it's like all the good guys are releasing it. And it's like a trickle. And so we're learning about all these things that we were told would happen as we are coming out of this national crisis or this national testing. We're going on a testing on the national, federal, state, city, county, and personal level. It's not just personal. We're all going through, which means two things are actually happening then. And I'm kind of giving you an overview today, so it's not going to be that long again. I don't know how long we're in. Oh, we're 19 minutes in. We're doing fine. So I really, really believe, this is me personally telling you this, my opinion. I believe that we're all being faced with whom we're serving. We're having to look at whether we're being honest with ourselves and honest with God. Because a lot of people think that they know God. Some of them think that they've had their butts planted in a pew for over 30 years and they don't know God any more than the man in the moon. And when I started, I've heard about that all my life. I've heard about the scripture, depart from me. I know you not. And that's always scared me too all my life, thinking, oh, do I really know you? Do I know you? But God said, how will you know my people? How will you know my true believer? By my love. By my warm, unconditional, godly love. There's no judgment in it. They're not trying to be your God. They're not even in the courts of heaven. It's not my place to judge you. It's not your place to judge me. Some of these people have lost their ever-loving minds, if they ever had one at all. But I mean, if you know God, then you realize he's the judge. God says, judge not lest you be judged in the courts of heaven or not. So everybody's like, well, then what are the courts of heaven for, Dr. Missy? That's a great question. I've wondered the same thing for years, and it's irritated the crap out of me, actually. I've gone to the Lord, and he said, well, the Lord told me this. He said, this is what you need to know. He said, I introduced it to you, in a way, the courts of heaven, to where you would actually learn how to come into my ways. I said, that doesn't tell me anything, Lord. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It doesn't explain a cotton picking thing to me. And he said, well, the courts of heaven are designed, he goes, they are a powerful tool. But when you first get introduced to them, what they serve you for is to help you enter in by helping you look at yourself. So all the things you're doing and judging everybody else for, you're being judged yourself. He said, so it's a deliverance tool to help you get free from you. And I thought, well, that's just a waste of time. What a waste of time. He said, no. Because when you come into all truth, when truth enters the room, guess who's speaking through you in the courts of heaven? That is me. That's the true and living King, where everything I have you say stands up in court. See, the flesh has no voice in the courts of heaven. That's the second heaven courts. That's the fleshly heart, the devil's heart that those people are operating through. They have no jurisdiction. They have no authority. Not God's will. They don't operate in God's will or God's ways, not God's purpose, not their part of kingdom. They think that they're God. They have turned over their allegiances to a different God, a little g. All the demons in their bloodline. So those are the demons that are speaking through them then. So those demons have zero power over you. Luke 10:19. I've given you, Colossians 10:4 and 5. God says, I've given you all power and authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and anything that exalts itself above the throne of God. So we have to know who we serve. Are we serving the true and living God, or are we caught up in our own flesh or with the spirit of religion where we thought we were okay? When in actuality, those disobedient people have now lost firepower because God has come into the room and they lost their way. So in this crossroads that many find themselves in with regard to how they're going to continue, are they going to continue on like they are? Where they're at, misaligned in time, or will they choose to get honest with God about what's going on in their heart so they can get a jump start and come into safety, where God will begin to fight their enemies like he used to do, like he used to be. And so, I don't know about you, but even today, like even in the spirit today, I can feel like this bogged downness on the body of Christ and this just fatigue. And so, Father, I just ask anybody listening to this, we take authority over this stuff, over all the witchcraft, over all the word weapons used by any enemy, Lord, that has no authority over them. And Father, if you didn't speak it, let it fall to the ground. Lamentations 3:37-38. If it's undergirded by governmental orders illegally, vetoing it, nullifying it. 1 Corinthians 1:19. Let it all fall to the ground, overruled, overturned. Acts 24:14, Job 36:32. They don't have any rights over you. And see, that's the place that God's trying to enter everybody into, to where they get over themselves and quit making themselves a golden calf. And he's trying to get us to wake up from our doldrums to realize who's God and who's not. So what's God talking about in this passage? He's talking about Isaac, by the way. And if you didn't know anything about Isaac, his dad was Abraham. And his dad was the man who God told, he said, come out from amongst them. He said, come out from amongst them, Abraham. Come out from amongst these people who think they know my ways, which was his family at the time. Come out from amongst them who were disobedient to the Ancient of Days. And so Abraham, and his obedience when he was alive and serving God, was an excellent example to Isaac and what the ways of God were like and how he should follow the Lord. And so Isaac was taught these things by his dad. And some of you are so blessed because your forefathers were like that. And I don't know about you, my dad walked away from religion. He walked away from the spirit of religion in his own family. He was kicked out of his family for not adhering to the spirit of religion. And he was forced to move out. And it was probably the best gift his dad ever gave him, because my grandmother knew the Lord. My grandmother Eunice knew the Lord. And I love my grandfather. They reconciled. My dad and my grandfather reconciled. But my dad made up his mind when he was in the middle of all that crap. He was like, this is not love. This is not God. I'm not going to participate in that. And so I was really blessed not to have been raised in church underneath this structure of death. And so I came to know love in a very, very different way. But my dad practiced the 10 Commandments, and he would teach us how to say our prayers every night, my mom and my dad. would teach us these things. And they taught us about how to endure sufferings because of the military and different things that we were taught growing up. But we had great examples in my forefathers. Some were operating in the truth and some lived a lie. And so, I mean, if you, hopefully you had those kinds of examples too, but you wouldn't have come this far had people or somebody in your bloodline not serve Christ. Okay. And even with the leaders before us in time, every different ministry serves its purpose for that season, but we have to know when to relinquish it for the next generation to bring forth the new move, which is where we've now entered into. So because of Abraham's obedience and being true to God, it allowed Isaac to learn the ways of love, where he would know the way back to the Ancient of Days instead of getting caught up in Phariseeism or the ways of the flesh. And let me tell you why that's important right now. This ties in with right where we're at. Because if Isaac went through it in his day, we're going through it right now. And you'll understand it in a second. But Isaac was the father of Esau and Jacob. You've heard that story a million times, right? Or one gives up his birthright and the other one schemes. He gets the blessing, but he schemes the Lord. He's scheming his way through. Yeah. So in Isaac's day, let me just go back to Isaac real quick. He was in enemy territory. How many feel like you're in enemy territory right now? It's all around you, coming out of the flesh. It signifies coming out of the flesh, coming out of your old. And so Isaac at this point in time had to make a choice whether to come out from amongst them to Abraham like his father had done when God said, come out. I don't want you to be like them, whether it means his church, whether it means your church, whether it means your family, friends, or relationships that you've entered into unlawfully. Are you in a bad relationship with somebody who doesn't love you like you deserve to be loved or like Christ would love you? See, some of you, let me say this too. Thank you, God. Some of you have been in relationships with Josephs in the past, people that really loved you like God loved you. And you didn't know what it was about them, but you know that they were true and that they really loved you differently from what you've experienced from that time on in time. You may have been a family member. It may have been a spouse, a brother, sister, I don't know, but they've moved on to a different place because we all have to come out from amongst them too. And so, but those people touch our lives. They touch our lives. And so we find ourselves in a season right now where we're looking back and we're trying to grasp at straws instead of grabbing for God, who is love, because a lot of people have fallen that far away from God, away from the truth. Imagine that. So when we refuse to acknowledge the truth of our own maybe bad choices that got us there, and trying to fill a void in our lives with a golden calf that doesn't belong there, then we keep degrading. We keep going down these bad pathways when all along over here is sitting the Ancient of Days. And he's like, hey, I'm right over here. I'm right over here. I was the one who loved you through that vessel, but you can have it again if you draw near. Come on over here. So why would you put yourself through all this crap again, over and over? Some people go through multiple marriages. I'm not dogging them, but some people go through all this hell unnecessarily because they won't listen to the Lord and the truth when he puts his finger on things. What do I mean by that? It means they're caught up in deception. They're caught up in deception where they won't be honest with him. They won't be honest with them or God. They won't be honest with themselves nor anybody else around themselves because they're so afraid of what it might cost them. Oh no, what if he didn't like me anymore? As though he doesn't know you're operating there. He's omniscient. He's already in your issue. He's in your place that you refuse to get delivered of. That's why he's putting his finger on it to get you free from you. God, and we put ourselves through so much garbage. But Isaac had to make a choice to come out from amongst them too, to stay stuck in the same cycles of bad behavior, or isn't that even going to include a church? Deceive churches, deceive bosses, where the devil and these people try to keep everyone entrapped. But because Isaac had learned the truth from his dad, and the ways his dad served the Lord, He actually had keys in recognizing the way through. He knew, and actually sometimes God will allow you to choose those bad things to show you what you don't want in relationships or in your circumstances, in a church, what you're not willing to tolerate anymore. And it's to show you the truth from a lie, to be honest with you, what true love is versus what it's not. And sometimes it takes some of us a little longer than others to learn the lesson. But Isaac had to learn to surrender. What does that mean? Surrendering is when you acknowledge to God the truths about yourself in a few things. It means you're willing to get washed in the water of the word. You're willing, and now that sounds religious, you're willing to learn the truth about you, which includes fresh manna, new oil, which helps you to come through. But if you know anything about surrendering to, and in this day and time, we've got so many stuck in pride. Like, oh no, I've got this God. I don't need to surrender to a power greater than myself. I've got my life. I've got it. I've got it. While you're on your 10th marriage, or while you're on your 10th job, or while you're going to your 30th church and your relationships suck and you won't look at your heart so God can bring you through. But truth, you know anything? And new wine is a precious commodity in this day and time, especially when you're coming into a new place. It's hard to find. It's really hard to find. And so you have to get confrontational about some things. You have to confront a thing or two and allow God to confront things in you. And the difference between Abraham and Isaac is Abraham was in your face with the truth, where Isaac was he was a quiet guy. He was kind of a quiet guy in the way he dealt with life. So you have to pick which one are you. Which one are you? So in both work. You don't have to be like me. I don't have to be like you. Isn't that great? So in some situations then, because of our personality differences, some people are built to confront, while others are confronting issues by leaving ungodly situations or environments very quietly. Both work. Both are win-win if you know how to do it with God. But again, unlike Abraham, his son wasn't built like him. So Isaac allowed God to speak through his silence. And you know, silence is sometimes the most powerful gift you can give somebody. Silence speaks louder than anything. And so it's all a part of God's personality that he operates through with the seasons that we walk through, because of the things that we don't want to evoke, like a hornet's nest around us when we're walking through. So when we're called to confront bad behaviors, as Isaac knew, Isaac chose to do his in his own way. And if we know anything about how his sons were led astray, Esau and Jacob, this is where you and I now reside. So this all may probably pertain to you, but do you deal with life by, we're talking about having to choose where we want our new to be. Okay. Where do you want your new to be? Do you want to have the same old demonic reality, the same old hell you've always been walking through? Are you willing to look at you? Because Esau wasn't hungry for the spiritual things. He gave up his whole blessing, his whole future, for temporary things, for fleshly things, for satisfaction in this moment, for his golden calf, if you will. Where Jacob was actually hungry for the spiritual things, but he was so worried about trying to help God out, so was his mother Rachel, that they manipulated God when God didn't need their help. God doesn't need your help to try to make your future come to pass, unless you're non-cooperative and you're stuck in your flesh. So Esau had an appetite for the things of the flesh, while Jacob had an appetite for the things of the spirit. And so even when God changed Jacob, he had to get his name changed like you do, so that he could come through. He had to choose to do things as truth would do. He had to wrestle with God over a few things too. And only God can course correct us and do the things that the spirit of religion can never do. The spirit of religion can't set you free. It cannot transform you. It's a death structure. It's used to keep you stuck. And so a lot of people are like, wait a minute, that's hard to wrap my head around. I've been raised in the Catholic Church and oh my God, that's all I've been raised knowing. Or I've been raised in the Baptist Church. Oh my God, what does that mean? Oh, she's in heresy. No. Jesus told them, he said, the only banner you should carry is love. Every other thing is man-made. It's the Presbyterian title, the Baptist title, the Catholicism title. It's all made by man. In man's attempt to be grand like God. Look, I'm a Catholic. Look, I'm a Baptist. Look, I'm a Presbyterian. Who cares? Look, I'm love. Hopefully represent what's above. Seriously though, Jesus said to wear only his banner, wear his spirit. How will you know my people? By my love, the warm, unconditional love of Christ, where people make you feel warm and welcome. And they're like, you're like, whoa, I got a few things. I got some stuff I'm dealing with. Okay, cool. So am I. So what? Oh, let's go to church together and let's just get cleaned up. How about we learn to love each other again, like God does these things, and instead of trying to play each other's God, we have no business operating in. So if you know anything, God had to change Jacob so he too could serve God correctly, because true faith is living without scheming, trying to plan your own destiny. Because if you know anything about where we're at right now we've entered into a season where the Esau's are waking up to what they've given up in God's spirit and power. Oh, the spiritual laws have narrowed. Isn't that an amazing thing? But Jacob, Joseph, the true bride, you have to keep on moving regardless of what the Esau's have to say, because no one tricked them into choosing the flesh. They willingly did it their way. This is where God had been talking to us about the last 5 years, saying, hey, this is the way, walk ye in it. This is the way, walk ye in it. Come on. And people, this is what's so amazing to me, and I'm not dogging these people, but I scratch my head. I scratch my head and I think to myself, good God, what were you thinking? But people do what they do. And it amazes me. It's like the guy, have you ever heard of that analogy where that guy, he has a problem and he goes down the street and he takes the turn on this one street and he sees a manhole and he falls inside. And then he thinks his friends come help him get out, and he gets out. Next day, goes down, he sees the street and he's like, and he goes down and did it again, and he falls inside the manhole. His friends help him out again. The next day, he goes down and he's thinking, I shouldn't go down that street, but he does it anyway. He falls in the manhole, and his friends help him out again. The next day, he's fighting with all of his might. He's like, I can't go down that street. I can't go down. Shouldn't go down that street. And it's like some of you addicted to bad things or bad people. Oh, but people can be an addiction sometimes, by the way, or being drawn to evil can be an addiction, but he's drawn down the street. The devil's a tempter. And he falls into the manhole. And the last time, when he wakes up the next day, and he's like, you know what, man? I'm sick of this cycle. Fed up with living like this. I'm tired of having people mistreat me. I am tired of being everybody's trash can. I'm tired of being gaslighted. I'm tired of being disrespected. I'm tired of this boss being a narcissist with the way they treat me like I'm their dog. I'm tired of this leader in this church acting like nobody minds that they're sleeping around or that they're a pedophile. We don't care anymore. We don't care. We just want the truth. So I'm not going to go there down that street anymore. He takes a different pathway. He goes down a different street the second he walks out his door, and he never looks back because he wants the more. He knows there has to be more than what he's been settling for. Which brings us to Matthew 9, 1 through 17. Overcoming weariness in the well-doing of faith. How many of you, if you're Overcoming. Don't get weary in well doing, because in due season you will reap a harvest if you don't faint and don't give up. See, God's trying to teach you not to faint, bride, not to faint, Joseph, Isaac, while he's bringing you inside. Have you been decreeing a thing for a while now? Because God's been teaching you a thing or two about time, about the divine, and about how to move forward regardless of what comes at you. Regardless of feelings, hurt, heartache. God's teaching us the hard things that we need to be true. He's looking for a warm, loyal, loving, godly bride. Because the enemy's not ever going to stop trying to hit you, Joseph. But in this season, if we're going to come forward, we have to learn to trust God no matter what. Because God responds to faith. Cooperating faith. Cooperative faith. You're doing exactly what he says. If he says to get deliverance, you're getting deliverance. You're getting free from you. And you're not taking it personal when he puts his finger on a thing or two. And you've learned that correction is not rejection. And you're learning to trust God again. And it feels so good to get free, to know who you are again. Have true identity like you used to maybe when you were 16, or that's what it felt like last time to me, when you were so sure of who you used to be in him. And then you realize by this time, because God's taken you around the block a time or two, right? And you've realized what things are of God and what things are not. And you're not as stupid as you used to be. That sounds bad, but that's the truth for some of us. Oh, God help me. So, but yeah. And so you're starting to get sure again. And you're starting to find out who you are again. But this time, it's a different ball game, because it's a double portion while you're entering it. A double portion of truth, a double portion of glory, a double portion of blessing. And you know this time is different. You don't know why, but you just know you're not willing to settle for what you used to settle into because of what you didn't know. So it's a place then that you're learning to trust God no matter what, because God responds to faith. And it's where we learn to move with God regardless of where he's taking us. So the real question then that we're facing is whether we believe. Joseph, do you believe? Why you feel like you're in your prison, or why you feel like you're in your false accusation, why you feel like you've been sold or just betrayed, why you feel like you're going through all these crazy things. And after all this time, you're still standing and believing for the thing God called you into, that you've been praying in. Do you believe God's able to meet that need? Because that's what trust does. See, trust believes God regardless of its suffering. It doesn't, your faith is not contingent upon what's going on outside of you. It's what's going on inside of you. Okay, what's God saying to you? And he's saying, oh my gosh, if you only knew what I knew, if you could see what I see. But here, let me share that with thee. I'm going to show you, because you're going to perceive it, you're going to know it, and you're going to see as I see, and then you're going to have my holy reality instead of settling for the things that used to trip you up in times past, that used to get the best of you. Because you believed in the beginning, says the Lord, and I believed through you. Oh, so check this out. Okay, so we're coming out of our flesh. You just dropped this in my spirit. We're coming out of our flesh. And the more delivered I get from me, the more I have the ability to believe. Whose spirit am I using? We're stepping into all truth. Oh my goodness. So you're starting to see as Jesus sees, because he's starting to show you as you come closer to him in time, into the divine. So when the test goes on way longer, or the difficulty lasts way longer than we anticipated, and you still choose to believe, even during your suffering. Because if you can, you will outlast the enemy every time, and you're going to get what you've asked God for every time. Which brings us to Psalms 10, 16 through 18. Do you know who the king is? Truly. Because you did it one time. Because God said in this passage to allow all other gods to be swept out of your life. Because the only way for the body of Christ to come forward is for all people who say that they know him to decide who is God and who is not. And it's not them. It's not them. So, it's not your ministry. It's not your job. Not yourself. It's not your family, your money, your prestige, your vanity or beauty, or the power amassed by man, which is nothing compared to God. It's him. It's only him. And he's making this truth really, really plain in this hour. I don't know how many other ways to Sunday God has to spell this out for us. So when we place ourselves into the position as king or queen, God, we stepped out into the zodiac clock, or the devil's heart, by the way, into our flesh, our own ways, forcing us to move away from the Ancient of Days. And although this godly test has begun to bore some of you to tears, because that's really the truth behind that, is that your flesh and your heart have been stepping into a temper tantrum like a little child, always needing the distractions. So it doesn't have to be renewed. But the test you're walking through, you want to know the truth? It was purposefully implemented to force all to choose what they would do. Every bit of it. Who are you going to serve? You're going to keep serving yourself? You're going to keep serving these little G's? You're going to get them out and make room for me? Who would they serve? Because this test has always been about who we honor. Are we always first in all things? Do we always put ourselves first? That's what the flesh does when love is others oriented. Or is it the Lord? Because sometimes we think we honor him, when in reality, our hearts are a mess and our bad behaviors are in the way. They blinded us to the truth about some things. And look at the demonic realities that the devil has been able to create in and around you because of those things. So when we're forced to get honest with the holy God because he's blocked us out or shut us off from him, that would make a person stop and consider their ways, or it should, because of the suffering that they have to walk within. And being separated from God is a horrible thing. Being separated from blessing is a horrible thing. And even though we're not separated really from God because God's omniscient, but having God draw back from us. See, the enemy knew how to do this thing. He used to be the lead strategist around the throne of God. So if he were the lead strategist, and God is the Word, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So if he was around the Word all the time, don't you think he would have learned a thing or two about what it would take to make you break spiritual laws, to force a holy God to draw back from you through your bloodline, or through personal sin? And so being separated from the blessing of God, from the destiny of God, because of bloodline cursing and things that we refuse to repent within, it's a horrible thing to live a lie. It's a horrible thing to live a lie. What do I mean by that thing? When your forefathers sin, they create demonic realities around you. And so that is as far as your faith can take you, unless you repent and come through. Because that separation causes us to endure hard suffering, hard things. And sometimes unnecessarily because of not having listened in past seasons. But when you know God is in the room, when truth is in the room, and you don't take full advantage of what he's called you to do, Esau, you have nobody to blame but yourself. Nobody. Because you're letting your flesh guide you. Which brings us to Proverbs 3:9-10 as we wrap up today. We're right on time. Oh my goodness. Where it talks about honoring the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Is God first in all that you do? And I know that sounds religious to maybe some of you, but the truth about that is he the first and foremost thing on your mind with every decision you make, with everything? And I think in the world's ways, thank you, Holy Spirit. in the world's ways, because the world has never been taught to allow God to lead them, to submit to a power greater than themselves. And I don't know why, because they're kind of limited. I mean, if you think about the flesh is made of clay. So it's going to go back to the dust. It's going to be dissolved. And it doesn't go on into eternity unless it knows a holy God. And so why wouldn't you want to be transformed into resurrection power, even while you're in the earth, especially so that you can walk out a heavenly reality on earth as it is in heaven? Why would I want to walk out hell unless I were operating Jezebel? That's a manipulative and controlling spirit who won't submit to a power greater than itself. And so, but when you do honor the Lord, when he's first in all things, he's first and foremost on your mind at all times, then God's going to honor you, and he's going to fill your barns up, filled up, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. You won't have room to contain what he's fixing to do for you. And so for the heart who's just starting out, and you're thinking, because everybody goes there, everybody starts at this place where we have a few things to get cleaned up and we have to make space for him. And we're thinking, well, that's what she said at the beginning. That's what Dr. Missy said. That's what the Lord said. I've heard this through a few prophets. But it's hard for a short season to get there. You know why? Because you have to let him clean up a few things. And you didn't get hurt overnight, Joseph. So it's going to take a while for God to unpack these things and get them off your life. But it's worth every minute of it. Once you start getting into the flow with God, and you start getting into his stream, and you start understanding how to honor him in all things and get your seed in the ground, and everybody's thinking, oh, you're all about my money. Could care less. It's a strategy. Keep your seed in the ground and life happens to you. Guess what? Malachi 3:10, honor the Lord with the 10th of your tithes, and God will fill up your barns, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing, good measure, and you won't have room enough to contain it. But it's the last part that I'm concerned about. And God will hold back the hand of the devourer. I want him to hold back the hand of the devourer while I'm getting free, because the enemy is not going to be so relentless, or he's not going to be so willing to let you go. He's going to be relentless about holding on to that land. He's going to fight you. And it's going to put you through a thing or two. And so God holding the hand back of the devourer while I'm trying to come out is a strategy. Keep your seed in the ground. It's a strategy. It's not people wanting anything from you. It's keeping your seed in the stream that's feeding you to keep you moving along while life happens. That's the love of God loving you. So anyway, okay, guys, I'm going to let you go. It's Friday. It's 3:19 my time. I'm going to go run around in the front yard in the cold while my teeth chatter. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, go have yourself a great day. And until we talk again on Tuesday, enjoy your weekend and stay warm. I love you. Bye.